At the beginning of October, Kelly and I were looking for a romantic, affordable date. There wasn't much to do in the area. We have hiked, discovered, and obtained food. Not much else is happening. To locate something, we therefore drove a new route that day, going somewhere neither of us had been before. On the side of the road, we happened to come across this little eatery. We went there because it was sitting outside. When we got there and sat down at a table outside the restaurant, it was a warm, gloomy day. After we left, the weather became substantially hazy for the remaining 45 to 60 minutes that we were there. We kept traveling along this route that we had never taken before, an empty road with nothing but farmland and wide fields on either side, with sporadic patches of trees and woods. Then, we came across a unique object. The advertisement was for a pumpkin patch, but that was a shoddily constructed sign. There was no large billboard or anything similar there. A wooden picket sign with an arrow pointing to the right and the words "pumpkin picking this way" was there. A dirt driveway ran just behind the sign and across the field. We could make out a home through the fog to which the driveway went, therefore a spur-of-the-moment choice. We both decided that it would be a good idea to check it out. We passed the home and entered this backyard, which was surrounded by trees on the left side and the far rear. I drove off the road and down the driveway. There was a sizable pumpkin patch tucked away between the home and the woods. We just saw what the fog permitted us to see, but there was a real pumpkin farm with at least 200 pumpkins scattered around. The only other car that could be seen on the property was this old jalopy pickup truck, so we parked next to it. A senior couple was relaxing on the house's back deck when we passed by. The two of them stood up and hailed us as soon as we exited. When I said that we were there to select pumpkins, the elderly woman grinned and added, "Welcome, pick whatever you'd like." The elderly woman said that a pumpkin would be free when I asked how much it would cost. We were taken aback. We couldn't see the two since the fog was acting as a type of wall between them. Although it was a little unsettling, I could still make out that the elderly man appeared to be grinning at Kelly. His gummy smile was kind of disgusting. After saying thank you, we both stepped into the pumpkin patch. The majority of the pumpkins were unattractive, mushy, and on the tiny side. I believe the fog made the ground a little damp, and some of the pumpkins felt dirty and wet as well. Finding a nice one was challenging, but we eventually did. This large, healthy-looking pumpkin caught my attention. It had weight. The elderly couple had just been on the back deck when I brought it over there. They were no longer present. Kelly said that we should likely simply leave when I inquired if we should. We had already thanked the couple, and they had made it apparent that they were free, so it seemed like we could leave. When we heard someone yelling outside, we got back in the car and prepared to leave when I started making a 3-point turn on the dirt driveway. When we both turned to face the house after being shocked, we noticed a middle-aged man screaming, "Hey, stop!" He smashed his face through the window as I lowered it and shrieked, "What the hell are y'all doing?" "I've dialed 911. What did we do?" I asked. "Put that pumpkin back immediately," he commanded. The elderly couple told us to take whatever we wanted. Kelly and I tried to explain to the man while talking over each other. "They look like his parents to me." "What senior pair?" the man questioned. "What are you referring to? Are your parents also present?" I retorted. "I don't have any parents," he claimed. I and Kelly exchanged glances as we both continued to be perplexed. The older couple told us to take everything we wanted while they were seated on your back porch. I added, "There aren't any elderly couples here," the man claimed. "Where was the pumpkin?" he inquired. "In the rear," I told him. He took the pumpkin after I unlocked the door. He threatened to shoot us if we returned here in the future. He then walked back to his residence after spitting on the ground. I drove us away from that place. We were completely perplexed. However, we gave the possibility of it being a joke some thought, but it would be a sick joke indeed. I jokingly asked, "What if there were ghosts?" Kelly yelled stop while visibly in a panic. But as I pondered what I had just stated, I started to feel cold. For a brief while, the automobile was silent. I am aware that we both thought about it. My two siblings and I visited the pumpkin farm one day out of curiosity to go pumpkin picking. They inquired with the man they had just purchased a pumpkin from about the farm, and whether or not he shared it with anybody else. The man claimed to reside alone there. Hearing this was unnerving. Even today, it still makes no sense at all. Could the man's claim that the elderly couple was present be a lie? I'm not sure. Maybe, but why? The more terrifying scenario is, who were those folks if he wasn't lying and lived alone? When I woke up in late October, one of my closest friends, Connor, had texted me to see if I'd be free to visit his place later. I was in high school at the time, so I typically spent the weekends with friends. It was a Saturday afternoon. Connor was staying with one of his elder sisters, whom I'll name Chantel, while his parents were out of town for the weekend. She allegedly kept an eye on him all weekend. With that knowledge, I realized he was merely inviting me over for a party. I agreed to the proposal and drove over to his place because, once more, I had no obligations at work at the moment. When I went to his place, we spent a few hours playing Call of Duty on the couch in the family room while chatting about whatever was important to us at the time. School, sports, girlfriends, etc. He eventually mentioned attending a Halloween party that several students from our high school were attending in his area. I was first a little hesitant about the concept, but after some persuasion, I was game. I'm not shy or anything. I was simply not in the mood to go out that night. But Connor was quite eager to go, so to be a good buddy, I consented. He had 2 security staff shirts that we could easily throw on and use as the bare minimum of a Halloween costume when I asked him about getting some sort of costume. Up until 10 o'clock, we played Xbox for a few more hours. 30 came around. As if Chantel cared, Connor hurried upstairs to her room and informed her that we were leaving. We then put our shirts on and left. We arrived at a house that had been adorned for Halloween and could hear loud music coming from inside after a simple 5-minute stroll. Loud music we had heard outside suddenly hit us as we passed the decorations and entered the room. Around 70 other high school students were present, and they were all screaming and chatting in small groups all over the room. It was just another typical prom. A few minutes later, I'd already lost Connor when Lino, a baseball teammate I hadn't seen all year, took me aside. He arranged me and a few of my other friends and teammates in a circle on a couch. We talked for a couple of hours, making fun of silly memories that were brought up in conversation and engaging in activities that were typically ignored. I was sleep-deprived and disoriented at this time of the night. I was aware that I needed to return home and get some rest for the evening. I searched the party for Connor, who was making out with a girl in the kitchen corner. I asked him if it was okay if I returned to his house and went to sleep, as I had unintentionally cut him off from his talk. He concurred and announced that he would stay a little while longer, but I was asked to go grab some drinks from the basement by the girl he was talking to. I realized I had fully disturbed their profound discourse, and I promised to do so. The least I could do was that. I quickly opened the door and made my way down the dimly lighted steps to the basement. I slipped on the last few steps and landed in the refrigerator. Behind me, a man's voice tried softly shouting boo as I opened it, greeting me. I jumped and raised my hands as I turned to face the source of the voice. A tall, 35-year-old looking man was standing behind me grinning and making an unexpected gesture with his hands. He was dressed in a black cloak outfit. Why in the world did that exist? I yelled, clearly slurring my words. The man left and identified himself as the relative of the party host. I was lost. I didn't even wonder why he was alone in a dark basement. Additionally, there was a sizable party playing loud music upstairs. When the guy made an awkward attempt to strike up a conversation, I told him I had to retrieve my friend's drink and leave the party. Even then, I didn't like his vibe and did everything I could to leave. Normally, when I'm out of it like that, I'm quite open and talkative to strangers. He muttered, "Nice to meet you." I bid my friend bye and left the party as I turned around and ascended the squeaky stairs. As I made my way back to Connor's house, the neighborhood's lights and Halloween-themed decorations illuminated the street, but that didn't matter because the stroll would only take a few minutes. As I walked, I thought back on the strange conversation I had with the man in the basement and couldn't get over the strange vibes he was giving out. The more I pondered it, the stranger it seemed to me. I finally made it to Connor's home. I was alone in the house because it was fully dark and Chantal's car was nowhere to be found in the driveway. I entered the creepy, black house without turning on any lights. I simply intended to sleep in the basement. I went down there and fell asleep on the sofa. I may have been sleeping for around 15 minutes when I heard something crash upstairs. It promptly woke me up. I made an effort to hear anything else, but I was unsuccessful. I tried going back to sleep after thinking I was hearing things. I'm not sure how much time passed after the crash when I first heard the floorboards creaking as if someone were walking on them. Though it sounded far too heavy to be either Chantal or Connor, I initially believed it to be one of them. I took out my phone and texted Connor to see if he had returned home. I focused on the ceiling while attempting to hear. The basement doors started to open. I heard someone coming down the stairway. I caught a glimpse of the stair opening as I peered over the room's bend. The man I had first noticed at the party was there, calmly standing in the path of the stairlight. I made an effort to remain silent while hoping that the man would simply leave. I was passed by for a brief time before he suddenly turned and discreetly exited the cellar, closing the door. I grabbed my phone and rang 911. I provided them with everything they required, explained the scenario to them, and carefully awaited their arrival in the basement. The windows down there were all sealed shut, despite my attempts to open them. The man was standing by the basement entrance before, but I had no way out of there. When the police finally arrived, they decided to arrest the man because he was still there. He was discovered skulking under Chantal's bed. When the police knocked on the front door downstairs, she had just finished getting ready for bed and was about to climb into bed. I don't know what he was trying to do, but it's obvious he followed me inside. The entire encounter has left me perplexed. Just the way things turned out makes me happy. Strangely enough, when the police looked at the footage from the nearby house, they could see the man following me home. But after rounding the curve and entering the cul-de-sac, he lost sight of me. He eventually lingered near Chantal, watching her exit her car and enter the house. He then crept around to the rear and entered through the back door. Be aware of your surroundings at all times. It was October in its middle. The magnificent blending of orange and yellow in the leaves was just beginning. I'm a gay man and my wife is Courtney. 2 years have passed since we got married. We planned to visit the Catskill Mountains in New York to take advantage of the fall foliage. We reserved an Airbnb close to Overlook Mountain, a well-liked hiking location. We go throughout the nation to explore national parks and well-known hiking locations since we are ardent hikers. Our third visit to Catskill, New York, was this time. A sweet-looking woman who appeared to be in her 50s or 60s was the Airbnb's proprietor. I won't call her by her last name, simply Kathy. Working with Kathy was straightforward, and she responded quickly. She handed me the code to the mailbox where the small house's key was stashed. There was a very rustic, cabin-like atmosphere inside. Both the walls and floors are made of wood, yet there are colorful carpets to cover the wood floors. It was attractive and well-kept, enough room for 2 people. Outside, there were trees everywhere. A little clubhouse with a pool table, dartboard, and various items displayed on the walls had been converted from a shed outside. When we arrived at the Overlook Mountain Trail's base, there were a few individuals present. A few, but not many. We would occasionally come across hikers on their way down the mountain while we were walking up it. We eventually settled on a large boulder with a breathtaking cliff view and just gazed for a while. We eventually heard a footstep behind us crush a leaf. When we turned around, a lone woman was reclining against a tree. She was about 55 years old. She was staring at us until we turned to look at her, at which point she uncomfortably turned her head. Otherwise, I would have said hello, but she made it awkward. Until we heard her randomly say hello, we just ignored it. We turned around once again and noticed she was staring at us. She greeted us back and inquired about our hometown. We just started a fairly normal chat with her after this. She identified herself as Melinda and claimed to be a local. She inquired as to where we were staying and offered her insight about potential check-in locations. I told her at an Airbnb just a little distance away. The conversation kind of fizzled out after she mentioned a few places to visit. "Well, it was lovely meeting you," Courtney and I replied as we began to make our way back down the trail to the car. Strangely, we observed the Melinda woman was now moving downward as well, but she was keeping her distance and was not in our line of sight. On the way down, we stopped to take a brief break and observed Melinda appeared to do the same. She continued to be inaudible. This was strange. We believed that she was following us, so we decided to just wait her out to see if she moved. She eventually did continue moving by us as she descended after a bit. As she passed past us, she smiled, gave us a quick look, and said, "Okay." Before continuing our descent, we waited until she was no longer in view. After returning to the parking lot, we immediately headed back to the Airbnb just up the street. After taking a nap since we were so worn out, we headed out to lunch at the well-regarded Garden Cafe. After that, it became completely dark, so we returned to the Airbnb to simply cuddle up and watch movies. We were going to get a good night's sleep after a long day of hiking. In the living area, there was just one TV, but it was configured with Netflix and other features. We then turned on a good movie that we had found. Halfway through the movie, we started nodding off because we were so exhausted. Courtney was utterly unconscious, and I could see that I was doing the same. I was abruptly jolted back to consciousness by the sound of knocks at the door. We were in the heart of a forest, and there was a lot of worry about door knocks. Nobody ought to be present. The door didn't have a peephole. I was unable to see who was there. I wouldn't dare glance through any of the closed blinds because they were all closed. Courtney was shaken awake and informed that the door was being knocked on. We waited for a second set of knocks that arrived only a few seconds after I silenced the TV. There was no chance, we both decided, of our opening the door. I texted Kathy to see if she was at the door because it was still early, around 9 in the morning. A woman's voice on the other side of the window knocked on it and asked if anyone was inside. Now both Courtney and I were terrified. We were probably in a panic. It is unusual for someone to knock on a stranger's window. The subsequent events were even more unsettling. The attempt to lift open the window was audible to us. Thank goodness it was secured. Kathy was calling me. When I showed Courtney, she suggested that perhaps she was outdoors when the call came in. Kathy answered the phone when I called in a hushed voice, letting me know that she was at home and asking if anyone was outside. She sounded perplexed and worried when I told her what was going on. She claimed that none of her friends or family members would visit that residence. We followed her instructions when she instructed us not to open the door. "I need help. Please allow me in," was the voice that called. When another window was knocked after the call was disconnected, we knew better than to fall for this. If we let them in, awful things would happen. We began to suspect the strange woman from the hiking trail. After all, if she had followed us back to the Airbnb, we would have been completely unaware of her presence. I entered the bedroom, which was entirely dark, and gingerly raised the blind a small amount to allow me to see outside. The window was being passed by a man. He was unaware of me. I returned to Courtney to inform her that there were numerous people present. This was an encroachment. We dialed 911, and while I was on the line, I gave them the address. There were a few additional knocks on the door, but we remained unresponsive. I think the knocking and yelling ended because the individuals outside gave up. It took some time for the cops to arrive, but once they did, we felt much better. The police were excellent and stayed with us while we made up our minds on what to do. We no longer felt safe remaining there tonight after what happened, so I contacted Kathy once more and explained why. She was entirely perceptive. The officer stayed with us as we packed our belongings and loaded the car, even though we had already paid for that night and the rest of the stay had been canceled. One of them drove us the short distance to the closest motel, where we spent the night. We drove home the following day, because in all honesty, we simply did not want to be in the neighborhood after that. We believe that this group was searching for easy victims to kidnap and may have been using a lady as some sort of scout to win their trust. When they spotted two young ladies hiking alone, they sought to target us. We have started to carry pepper spray as a form of self-defense.